Broken woodland divides the landscape for exposed crossings, shaded cover, and elevated routes through the canopy. For baboons on open ground, group cohesion provides warning time that speed alone cannot guarantee. A grazing edge becomes vulnerable when elevated cover gives a lion both concealment and a wider view. At ground level, pursuit can push a primate away from the vertical routes that offer greater security. Once distance collapses, a brief opening can become the energy that sustains a hunting group. Forest patches, grass, rock, and water concentrate different species within the same network of pressure. Birds rising above the canopy can carry evidence of disturbance far beyond the hidden source. For a lion, elevation combines shade and visibility, while creating an approach unfamiliar to animals below. These encounters belong to one connected habitat, where the same terrain creates both shelter and exposure. Scattered cover turns every crossing into a decision between the shortest route and the safest one. Rocky outcrops divide the plain into lookouts, shelters, and narrow approaches that favor patient hunters. During the hottest hours, big cats conserve energy because an unsuccessful chase carries a high cost. Wet ground offers relief to grazers, but it also draws hunters and competitors into closer range. Tall grass softens heat and visibility at once, concealing both vulnerable animals and approaching movement. Across open ground, distance provides early warning, yet it can also leave safety frustratingly far away. Within the pride, resting conserves strength, while younger cats remain close to experienced adults. In the canopy, tangled branches give primates escape routes that most ground-based threats cannot follow. That refuge still demands balance, because every shift through narrow branches carries its own risk. Beyond the trees, grazing herds depend on spacing, shared awareness, and uninterrupted views across the grass. Each lowered head gains food, but temporarily gives up the clearest view of approaching danger. Light-bodied antelope depend on early reaction, before a pursuit has enough time to develop. A baboon's fixed gaze reflects the constant assessment required along an exposed route. Dry riverbeds funnel movement, turning open sand into a corridor visible from several directions. Troop movement distributes vigilance across the group, while individuals near the edges remain most exposed. At the forest boundary, cover reduces visibility for prey and approaching hunters alike. Climbing changes that balance by providing escape time that ground speed may not offer. A raised perch can serve as lookout, resting site, and feeding position within the same space. Rock faces matter because vertical escape routes are limited and unevenly distributed across the habitat. Feeding beside a trunk keeps the animal close to shelter while it gathers energy. As vegetation thickens, sightlines shorten, and sound becomes increasingly important for orientation. Smaller primates gain an advantage from agility, using branches to light for heavier animals. For gorillas, dense forest supplies food and cover, while their feeding strategy favors measured movement. Birds bursting above the canopy show how disturbance can travel before its cause becomes visible. A gorilla's size is obvious, but daily survival depends on processing large amounts of vegetation. That strength is maintained quietly through repeated feeding rather than sudden bursts of activity. Dense foliage conceals feeding animals, while providing much of the vegetation they depend upon. Above the forest floor, climbing opens new feeding routes, but increases the consequence of a mistake. Strong hands and extended reach turn branches into usable pathways through the canopy. In a vertical habitat, the safest route is often the one most concealed by leaves. Beneath the canopy, important interactions may remain hidden until sound or movement exposes them. Chimpanzees use height for travel, feeding, and observation, shifting repeatedly between branches and ground. At ground level, group strength depends on numbers and the signals shared between individuals. A focused expression accompanies the constant visual assessment required in dense forest. Resting in proximity helps maintain social stability before the group moves again. In dense forest, social coordination can be as practical as any physical adaptation. Feeding among leaves allows the animal to remain partially concealed and close to cover. Every climb requires careful route selection because strength alone cannot make an unstable branch safe. On dry banks, baboons lose much of the forest's concealment and must evaluate open space. The channel funnels animals into predictable routes, giving concealed observers a clearer advantage. For young baboons, proximity to adults turns group structure into mobile protection. Vertical space gives the leopard access to concealment, rest, and territory above crowded ground. Branches also shelter smaller primates, placing them beyond the reach of many ground threats. A high perch lets a baboon rest, while continuing to monitor movement along the river corridor. In the grass below, that advantage disappears, and the group must rely on continued movement. Raised deadwood provides a temporary platform above the most exposed part of the ground. The same structure can support lions, making one animal's refuge another animal's vantage point. Under deep shade, concealment favors both the observer and the animal being watched. Scattered woodland creates small pockets of shade, feeding opportunity and early warning. When birds gather in the branches, the canopy becomes another concentrated feeding zone. In the wetland, survival depends less on cover and more on balance, reach, and patience. A fish eagle benefits from height because much of the hunt begins with visual detection. From an exposed branch, it can scan the water without spending energy over every movement. Cranes use long legs to forage through grass while keeping their heads above much of the cover. In tall wetlands, each step must balance feeding opportunity with continued awareness. A lowered beak searches efficiently, though the bent neck briefly reduces the bird's field of view. Bright plumage may be conspicuous, but successful feeding still depends on controlled, precise movement. Among primates, trees again provide the most reliable route away from pressure on the ground. Within thorn and scrub, adults remain near positions that keep younger animals close to cover. Dog-like hunters pressure the edges, using rapid movements to disrupt the group's formation. For a baboon, an open bank removes many of the escape routes available among branches. At close range, repeated pressure can matter more than size when retreat options keep narrowing. Across pale ground, the hunters continue moving, searching for separation within the group. Persistence becomes their advantage, preventing scattered primates from settling into a stable defense. By dusk, delayed access to cover can turn a routine crossing into a serious disadvantage. After conflict, grooming and close contact help restore the social order that supports the troop. Care reduces mobility, yet it keeps the youngest animals inside the group's defensive structure. Rock faces and exposed roots become safer resting sites only while adults remain nearby. Rest and vigilance overlap, with even stationary animals maintaining their place within the group. A solitary crossing exposes the trade-off clearly. Rapid movement forward, but little cover nearby. Across this landscape, each species solves the problem of exposure through a different combination of traits. On open ground, a cheetah's speed becomes decisive only after the right approach has been chosen. A leopard answers open terrain with height, combining shade, concealment, and physical strength. Spotted fur breaks the body's outline among branches, making stillness part of the hunting strategy. A lion above ground changes the level from which passing animals must assess danger. At close range, bark, shadow, and patterned fur work together to break the hunter's outline. In dry grass, the same predator must remain low until movement creates a workable opening. Nearby primates keep height within reach because the ground allows less time to respond. As daylight fades, reduced visibility makes familiar routes more difficult to judge. Dark trunks and deep shade create pockets where approaching movements can remain difficult to detect. The transition to evening shifts the advantage from long sightlines toward caution and attentive listening. A hooked beak and forward-facing attention suit a hunter that must handle prey precisely after capture. Below the trees, baboons continue using raised cover to reduce exposure to sudden pressure. At the waterhole, different needs converge, concentrating animals along the same limited shoreline. For perched hunters, waiting saves energy because movement eventually enters the available field of view. A lion's stillness conserves the power needed when a brief opportunity finally appears. For baboons leaving the road, tall grass conceals their bodies, while also hiding approaching threats. Lions moving through greener ground follow the same concentration of shade, prey, and water. In thicker forest, climbing restores the advantage of agility over sustained pursuit on open ground. The showbill's stillness suits a marsh hunter that depends on timing more than continuous movement. Beyond the reeds, wild dogs use coordinated movement to keep pressure distributed across the group. Along the bank, baboons divide between water and cover, with each route carrying a different course. Juvenile play develops grip, balance, and timing that later support more demanding movement. When pursuit reaches the trees, a single well-timed leap can determine whether escape remains possible. Moving buffalo reshape the immediate space through mass, dust, and tightly coordinated momentum. Once the movement passes, cover again becomes valuable to animals unable to match that force. Cubs develop within periods of rest, when nearby adults reduce immediate exposure. A young lion separated from the group remains less protected, despite the pride's overall strength. Young cats explore the same elevated spaces that other animals use to avoid danger. Baboons respond through proximity, keeping infants against adults able to move and signal quickly. A concealed cat demonstrates how shade can hide a powerful hunter until distance has already narrowed. Attention must extend upward, because threats in this habitat can emerge from more than one level. A successful capture reveals the consequence of being trapped between ground pressure and limited refuge. For the pride, one capture supplies energy while giving younger animals access to the feeding sequence. The baboon continues across open ground, where every step remains shaped by limited cover, while dogs crossing the road show how coordinated movement can quickly renew pressure on scattered animals. A lone baboon near shade depends on position and concealment rather than a long escape route. At the water's edge, thirst draws the troop into exposure that cannot be avoided indefinitely. On the road, group shape matters as adults and young move through open space together. A final look out above the leaves returns attention to the advantages of height and visibility. The final position on rock emphasizes how access to elevation can reduce exposure below. For baboons, height is the first defense, turning branches into early warning before drinking begins. At the exposed shore, the troop accepts a necessary trade, water access for reduced cover. Adults and young keep close, because open ground makes separation more costly than crowding. The rocks and gullies offer escape routes, but reaching them means crossing visible ground. Across this habitat, safety often lies above ground, while food and water pull animals downward. For antelope in tall grass, alertness matters before speed can solve anything. At water's edge, different bodies gather around the same need, compressing choices into a narrow line. The elephant works through broken ground slowly, using reach where footing and brush restrict movement. On open tracks, baboons travel as a unit, keeping the vulnerable inside the group's shape. In tall grass, the troop's advantage is not invisibility, but constant shared watching. A solitary grazer near cover relies on stillness, sharp hearing, and enough open space to escape. In the forest, gorillas solve the same problem differently, relying on cover and close feeding. Dense leaves provide food, concealment, and a quieter pace than the exposed waterline outside. Within dense foliage, limited visibility favors animals that recognize movement through sound and nearby disturbance. Strength matters here, but the group also survives by staying within familiar green corridors. Smaller primates moving low through vegetation trade body size for speed, balance, and rapid changes of direction. For a heavy bird, the canopy provides distance from disturbance and the stable position above the forest floor. Remaining above the branches can reduce interference when feeding opportunities below are scattered and unpredictable. On the grassland below, grazing animals keep their heads moving between food and warning. A large cat in the branches turns height into secure space when activity on the ground becomes crowded. Vertical space can become extra territory, especially when shade and escape matter together. Across these hills, cover offers protection, while every exposed crossing increases the cost of movement. Elephants crossing dry scrub depend on established routes and remembered resources more than speed. Size opens a path through brush, yet it cannot remove the need to find water. Each movement serves a practical need, whether reaching shade, forage, companions, or the next water source. In broken terrain, the trunk becomes a tool for testing, feeding, and reading the ground. Vegetated corridors often retain more moisture, giving large animals practical routes through an otherwise dry valley. A spotted cat in the undergrowth uses concealment first, keeping the chase from starting too soon. Open roads simplify travel but remove cover, making group spacing and awareness especially important for baboons. Elephants near the track appear unhurried, but their route is still shaped by scarcity. Scattered trees offer shade and recognizable stopping points where moving animals can pause without losing direction. In the wetlands, long legs turn shallow edges into hunting ground without a costly swim. Where insects and small prey concentrate, birds can feed beside much larger animals. A crowded canopy spreads vigilance across many birds, reducing the burden carried by any single lookout. Shallow water gathers food into strips, which is why so many species crowd the margins. Display and pasture also matter here, helping pairs keep contact inside busy feeding grounds. The wet corridor supports more than drinking. It creates nurseries, perches, and constant traffic. A wire barrier interrupts the route, adding a human obstacle to movement between feeding and watering areas. Beyond the fence line, elephants gather where the remaining water keeps the landscape connected. The same water corridor draws the largest bodies, forcing slow decisions in shared space. Calves gain safety from the surrounding mass, while adults keep access to drinking positions. Shade and trunks break the herd's outline, giving cover without separating the group. At the edge, trunks lower first, and every head-down moment reduces awareness. Nearby wet ground opens the scene to other heavy animals, and another layer of competition. The river functions as more than water, linking feeding grounds, shade, shelter, and movement across the habitat. Long-legged birds use the same wet margins, with less force and far greater precision. Their nesting trees sit close to food, but also close to disturbance from below. Crowded branches spread the warning system through the colony as movement passes underneath. Along the water, the canopy becomes shelter, shade, and a connected route above disturbance on the ground. Open grass beyond the trees shows the contrast, plenty of visibility, but fewer places to vanish. A single tree can mark a crossing point where shade, rest, and travel overlap. Green corridors are valuable because they let animals move while spending less heat and energy. White birds moving through the leaves emphasize how heavily wildlife uses this protected edge. For nesting birds, crowding is not disorder, it is a practical layer of defense. Below the canopy, elephants keep returning to the same pockets where water and shade meet. Around the trees, grazers and browsers share shade, each reading the other's forewarning. A lion can conserve strength through restraint, because unnecessary chases spend energy that may be needed later. A caw or yawn can communicate condition and presence without the cost of direct confrontation. At the water hole, even lions enter a vulnerable posture, heads lowered and attention narrowed. Cover lets the male close space before other animals can judge his direction. With other lions nearby, position and group support can matter as much as speed in controlling access. Resting in grass is not inactivity. It is how predators protect their limited reserves. When the lions rise, the tall vegetation conceals movement while limiting their own view. The herd beyond the grass will only matter if the lions choose the right angle. On open ground, strength alone is rarely enough without cover to shorten the final distance. Across the wide plain, the hunt depends first on patience, terrain, and the distance closed before pursuit. For spotted cats, the chase begins long before sprinting, while grass hides the first approach. Their spotted coats break the body line just enough to delay recognition at a distance. But open country quickly removes that cover, leaving timing to decide whether speed can matter. A nearby hyena represents another strategy, using endurance, social pressure, and repeated testing of weakness. Once meat is exposed, hyenas turn numbers into access that a solitary scavenger would lose. Carrying a piece away reduces conflict and turns a crowded meal into private energy. Powerful jaws and strong necks allow hyenas to process resistant food that many competitors leave behind. At the edge of the group, watching matters because feeding order can shift quickly. Clustered bodies make the meal chaotic, but they also help defend what remains. After the feeding rush, stillness becomes recovery, and recovery prepares the next search. The lioness at the kill holds access because others must approach through exposed grass. Beyond her, wildebeests keep moving, their spacing deciding how quickly alarm can spread. As light drops, grazers bunch together because fading visibility raises the cost of separation. Scavengers stay in the same story, arriving wherever a kill leaves something worth contesting. Fading stormlight reduces visibility, encouraging animals to follow routes they already know well. A lion moving through cover uses that uncertainty, but cover works only until exposure returns. Giraffes answer pressure differently, using height to browse above the reach of most competitors. The same height becomes awkward near dense brush, where long bodies need space to turn. In a small group, their watchtower view is strongest when several heads scan different angles. As daylight weakens, familiar advantages depend increasingly on timing, spacing, and the ability to detect movement. Dust raised around a moving herd can blur individual outlines and make pursuit more difficult. Farther away, elephants follow slower priorities, reading shade and forage along the path. The male lion watches from cover, where patience can matter more than visible force. As large herbivores feed, they open paths through undergrowth that smaller animals may later follow. Zebra stripes complicate a hunter's view when the group stands tight and partly hidden. For a lion at close range, choosing the right target comes before any burst of strength. Above the ground, a leopard turns branches into storage, safety, and a harder approach. At night, the open plain becomes a field of silhouettes, shifting attention toward sound, scent, and memory. Near dawn and dusk, low light narrows visibility and makes the boundary between movement and concealment less certain. A lion at the carcass keeps the first claim, while every exposed bone invites competition. Elephants at the waterline and cats in cover share one pattern. Resources draw attention. Hyenas read those edges well, moving between leftovers, scent trails, and fresh disturbances. Even while resting, a lion can alter nearby movement because other animals respond to its presence. Wild dogs near a lion reveal a different kind of strength, built on numbers and movement. At the water's edge, the pack drinks quickly without allowing the group to loosen. On the road, their formation keeps contact visible, turning travel into organized searching. The next chase begins with attention. Eyes, ears, and direction decide who reacts first. A brief delay can determine whether an encounter remains observation or becomes a feeding opportunity. Once the pack reaches food, scavengers and rivals are already part of the calculation. Even at the shoreline, their advantage depends on staying together while reading the far bank. In thicker cover, the pack becomes harder to follow, but coordination also becomes harder to maintain. Resting close together preserves contact, keeping young or tired animals within the pack's visual and physical signals. Ears, posture, and brief glances carry information faster than any single animal can chase. When one dog moves, the rest must read whether it is travel, alarm, or pursuit. At the carcass, feeding is rapid because delay gives competitors time to close in. After feeding, rest helps reduce exertion, while the group remains close enough to respond together. A lone grazer beyond the pack keeps space, because distance is its simplest defense. Inside the brush, patterned coats break into shade, making a resting pack difficult to separate. The pack's white-tipped tails and large ears help maintain contact through broken vegetation. A hyena entering the edge changes the pressure, because leftovers rarely remain uncontested. Its pale coat blends with dry grass, reducing contrast when a cautious approach matters more than speed. Tracks across red soil reserve the direction of movement after the hunt, turning dust into a temporary record. Carrying scraps through cover converts another animal's kill into energy for the next day. The sequence ends with a familiar ecological pattern. Each meal redistributes pressure among hunters, scavengers, and survivors. Scavenging begins after the kill, as hyenas search the grass for whatever access remains. A hyena's jaws make leftovers valuable, turning scraps that others abandon into usable energy. The pressure concentrates near water, where scent, tracks, and weakened animals cross the same narrow ground. Standing in shallow water reduces awareness, even while cooling a body exposed to persistent heat. Vultures signal that the carcass is drawing wider attention, increasing competition around the remains. For hyenas, feeding and drinking are linked, because strength fades quickly in dry heat. At muddy edges, feeding order can matter as each animal balances hunger against possible conflict. The next hunter approaches the same landscape differently, relying more on silence than group pressure. A leopard's spotted coat breaks its outline, helping dry grass conceal a body held low. Low cover narrows the space between hunter and target before any chase becomes possible. Vertical space gives the leopard another refuge when competitors make the ground increasingly difficult. Climbing can protect food and position, while returning to the grass restores the risks below. In broken shade, the cat uses patience as much as muscle to close the gap. The hunt does not begin with speed, but with choosing where attention is weakest. Once the body lowers, shoulders and paws help turn concealment into a shorter striking distance. Even an agile hunter must return to open water, where thirst interrupts every advantage. Dense thickets change the rules, giving dark-coated cats cover that open plains deny. Branches conceal movement, but restrict vision, making sound, gaps, and nearby motion increasingly important. On the open plain, a lion's size brings both physical force and a high-energy cost. Facing a wall of wildebeest, strength alone is useless unless one body can be separated. Horns and mass build a moving barrier, pushing predators to search for the edges. Forward movement can spread alarm through the herd, while dust and crowding complicate individual escape. A lion conserves energy by watching the herd shape for any separation or loss of pace. Where cover breaks the plain, a chase becomes a calculation of paths, not courage. Large migrations turn dry country into a corridor, linking grazing, thirst, and pressure together. Seen as a whole, the herd's movement reflects many individual reactions traveling in the same direction. A calf beside its mother shows why group movement must protect the slowest bodies. Every step across open ground spends energy, and energy decides how long escape remains possible. Near the ground, a smaller animal survives through persistence rather than speed, height, or overwhelming force. The honey badger searches close to the soil, using powerful claws to reach concealed food. Even a larger hunter may hesitate when close contact with a determined opponent becomes costly. The advantage here is persistence, turning roots, holes, and insects into dependable meals. Its low profile reduces the target, while scent guides it through grass that hides food. Its contrasting pattern can discourage close contact, creating space around an animal with limited size. Feeding with the head down is always exposure, so brief pauses become necessary checks. What looks like foraging is a cycle of digging, listening, and retreating before pressure closes. The river draws many species toward the same corridor, where water reshapes movement and exposure. Green banks create refuge and ambush at once, tightening the space between drinkers and watchers. Wading birds use the shallows on a smaller scale, hunting where ripples expose tiny movements. At the edge, antelope keep their bodies ready, because drinking leaves little time to turn. Lions enter this corridor with a different problem. Power must be spent carefully. A lowered head at water is a brief weakness, even for animals built to hunt. When the pride gathers, pursuit gives way to recovery as each lion conserves remaining energy. Rest in shade is not idleness. It is the only way to afford the next burst. A male's bulk provides force, but heat turns unnecessary movement into an expensive choice. Young lions depend on the adult's success before they can pay the price themselves. Resting close together can keep young lions within the protective reach of nearby adults. Across the river flats, open sight lines decide whether patience or movement comes first. In close view, the lion's stillness reflects energy being conserved rather than strength being displayed. Moving out again, lions test whether cover can shorten the exposed approach to prey. Several bodies around the shade turn one resting place into a protective center. Young lions develop coordination during quieter periods before they can manage hunting distance independently. The focus widens to elephants, where size changes the balance around water. A trunk lets an elephant drink without surrendering the whole body to the ground. Great mass offers safety, but it also requires constant movement toward enough food. At a crowded bank, trunks and large bodies manage space with less urgency than smaller drinkers. Moving through brush, their size opens paths smaller animals may later use. Wrinkled skin, broad ears, and protective eyelashes help elephants manage heat, dust, and glare. Calves stay inside the moving wall, where adult bodies turn size into shelter. At the bank, trunks let drinking continue, while feet hold steady in soft mud. The trunk works like a flexible tool, gathering water, while the body remains upright. Calves stay near larger bodies, where family structure turns movement into protection. Contact between trunks and bodies helps the group remain coordinated during slow, collective movement. On open flats, the herd itself becomes the safest piece of cover available. Zebras answer exposure with a different design, relying on attention before speed. In a moving group, stripes can make individual outlines harder to follow and isolate. At the water's edge, their defense weakens each time a head drops to drink. Mixed drinkers create a shared alarm system, but they also crowd the same escape space. Spacing between grazers preserves escape lanes, turning alert posture into a practical defensive advantage. Every lifted head adds information, helping the group decide when stillness becomes flight. A nearby lion explains why vigilance must continue even after the drinkers leave the water. The caracal operates at a smaller scale, using sensitive hearing to locate nearby movement. Resting low under cover conserves energy until a close strike is worth the effort. For young cats, cover is protection first, long before hunting skill can be trusted. Remaining hidden matters because smaller predators benefit from reducing the distance before any strike. The scene hardens with buffalo, animals whose defense begins in massed shoulders and horns. Near water, even size loses certainty because drinking pulls attention downward. A tight group turns individual horns into a wider barrier around the vulnerable center. Crowded banks protect animals within the group, yet the outer edge remains easier to test. For buffalo, grazing is labor because a heavy body must constantly replace spent strength. Heavy, reinforced horns support a head adapted to resist pressure rather than yield ground easily. Mud and rest reduce heat stress, but lying down temporarily trades defense for recovery. When the herd rises and spreads, every animal becomes both shield and early warning. Through scrub, feeding keeps them moving, while hidden cover can conceal the next pressure. The close view reveals the compromise between physical power and the continued need for alert senses. Giraffes meet the same dry woodland from above, feeding where height becomes access. A rhino depends on armor and weight, but poor visibility makes caution essential. At the mud, bodies built for power still answer the simplest need for cooling. Nearby lions show that strength takes different forms across species and situations. Predators rest beside their young because the next meal begins after energy returns. An elephant moving through shade can open paths simply through its size and steady passage. Small birds occupy the gaps larger animals miss, turning insects into quick, precise meals. Across the landscape, separate survival strategies remain connected by water, cover, heat, and movement. Across the scrub, distance becomes the invisible force deciding who can reach what. A wide view explains how scattered resources influence the routes animals repeatedly choose. In the trees, monkeys shift the problem upward, making branches their roads and refuges. Leaves provide food and concealment together, so height becomes more useful than speed. Group feeding keeps many eyes active, spreading warning through small movements and calls. For young primates, safety begins with contact, not independence, inside the canopy's cover. A close face emphasizes constant watchfulness when threats may approach from several directions. On the mound, open ground reduces that safety, forcing the group to scan constantly. Nursing links energy, protection, and movement because dependent young remain closely tied to adults. Back at ground level, antelope live by reading open space before crossing it. Long horns and high heads matter only if the animal detects trouble early. Oxpeckers use a grazer's body as feeding space, while potentially adding another source of disturbance awareness. Sharing the water hoe with elephants changes the danger, but not the need for caution. At one shoreline, different bodies solve the same need through very different physical strategies. Powerful legs remain the antelope's main escape advantage before any pursuit begins. Across red soil, wider spacing keeps routes open for a sudden retreat. A mongoose on a mound turns height into a lookout over a dangerous feeding ground. The pangolin relies on overlapping scales, trading speed for a strong physical defense. That shield allows careful searching where speed would not be enough. Mongooses work faster, using quick pauses to balance feeding with instant retreat. Burrows and grass from a broken network, letting small bodies disappear between searches. As the group spreads, multiple watchers reduce the exposure faced by each foraging animal. Perched birds use height differently, launching from branches toward insects passing through air. A narrow branch becomes a hunting platform, giving sight, balance, and a quick return. Bright plumage does not remove exposure, so speed and precise movement remain important. For these birds, the open sky is feeding ground, but every perch remains shelter. The closing moment returns to a smaller scale, where one perch can support both feeding and escape. From quick insect hunters above, the wetland opens toward the heavier lives moving through the grass below. Open sky gives small birds room to hunt, while wet grassland concentrates larger animals beneath them. Tracks through tall reeds suggest that food, cover, and safe passage organize movement across this ground. Where water divides the plain into islands, animals must navigate edges that offer both access and exposure. At this muddy boundary, rhinoceroses bring immense weight and thick protection into unstable ground. Their size discourages most threats, but feeding still forces the head down and vision inward. Rest conserves energy, although such massive bodies still require effort whenever they rise or change direction. Here, endurance matters more than speed, because carrying great weight through heat steadily drains energy. Thick hide resists injury, while low grass demands the slow work of constant grazing. Small birds add another ecological layer, feeding around skin that larger animals cannot easily inspect. A massive grazer disturbs insects and vegetation, creating feeding opportunities for smaller animals nearby. Brush provides cover, but dense growth also restricts the movement of bodies built for open space. The horn becomes most important at close range, when little space remains for avoidance or retreat. In dense scrub, a rhinoceros gains defensive value by meeting approaching pressure with its strongest end. Even retreat is physical work, because bulk must push through stems and uneven ground. A smaller hunter now depends less on size and more on concealment, agility, and access to water. A low head and slight ripple reduce the visible outline, allowing movement without full exposure. A swimmer built close to the surface can cross open water while revealing very little of its body. Below the surface, success depends on breath control, rapid turns, and sensitivity to changing currents. On land, those aquatic advantages weaken, so the otter remains close to cover and a quick return route. Wet rocks provide a feeding platform, though safety still depends on immediate access back to the water. Group movement helps divide attention, letting one animal feed while another scans the edge. Dense fur traps an insulating layer, reducing the energy loss during repeated movement through cold water. The same water that supplies food also limits how long each search can continue before energy falls. The river now favors a different strategy, built around concealment, powerful jaws, and prolonged stillness. A crocodile's rough surface provides protection while helping its body blend with muddy banks and shadow. Once it moves, a quiet edge can become sudden force, and secure footing may disappear immediately. The muscular tail provides propulsion and steering, controlling heavy movement through shallow or muddy channels. Basking restores heat, allowing long periods of waiting without constant feeding pressure. Eyes positioned above a submerged body allow the bank to be watched with minimal exposure. On open mud, armor looks obvious, but concealment returns the moment water covers it. A resting crocodile preserves energy and concealment, holding power in reserve until movement becomes worthwhile. With only the snout raised, the animal can breathe and monitor activity while remaining largely concealed. The exposed bank becomes dangerous because every visitor enters an area that may already be under observation. A hippopotamus uses its enormous mouth as a warning display when space becomes contested. In crowded water, display may prevent direct contact before an encounter causes serious injury. Resting hippos can provide temporary feeding platforms for smaller birds above the waterline. Water supports their weight and helps limit heat exposure during the hottest part of the day. Crowding makes the pool both refuge and pressure point, as many large bodies compete for limited space. High eyes and ears let the animal remain submerged while still reading the air. A subtle change in posture can indicate whether another animal is entering or challenging occupied space. Leaving the pool changes the calculation, exposing bulk that water normally helps support. Rest also limits energy use in a habitat where heat makes unnecessary movement increasingly costly. The bank links feeding areas and shelter, while concentrating animals along routes that become easier to predict. Mud and shallow channels cool exposed skin, although they can also slow a heavy animal's movement. Above the mud, a stork exploits the same wetland edge with a far more specialized body plan. Long legs turn shallow water into hunting ground without committing the whole body. Its long bill provides reach and precision, striking before small aquatic prey can escape. Each step has to be quiet, because vibrations can scatter food before the strike. Bright color attracts attention, but the practical advantage lies in reach, balance, and patient timing. In reeds, height lets the bird see over cover, while keeping its feet in food. These narrow wetland margins support specialized animals by concentrating shallow water, cover, and accessible food. Beyond the marsh, high mountains influence where water forms, gathers, and eventually reaches the valleys below. Snow and ice store water that later sustains lower wetlands, rivers, and feeding grounds. An open valley may appear abundant, yet its productivity still depends on weather collected at higher elevations. Across high grasslands, strong wind and exposure turn every movement into a measurable energy cost. Forests below the slopes collect moisture, creating narrow bands where life can thicken. Cloud crossing the ridges can quickly alter visibility, temperature, and the safety of movement. Broken peaks divide habitat into pockets, so nearby valleys may support very different animals. Streams create natural corridors, drawing animals through terrain where easier routes are scarce. At high elevation, thin air, cold, and open terrain shape which adaptations remain effective. Sunlight across salt and exposed ground emphasizes how little shelter this plateau provides. Life concentrates where mineral lakes, sparse vegetation, and usable ground interrupt the surrounding exposure. Flamingos use shallow highland water as feeding habitat despite the basin's cold, open conditions. Away from the lake, open slopes leave animals visible long before they meet. Highland grazers answer that exposure with numbers, spreading many eyes across the scrub. Their long legs help cover ground where forage is scattered in small patches. A fox uses the same terrain differently, relying on persistent searching rather than direct force. Rest supports the hunt by conserving energy that uncertain food supplies may not quickly replace. Patchy snow disrupts scent trails and visual contrast, making the ground more difficult to interpret. On loose stones, the hunter keeps its nose low, turning the ground into information. Cold open ground exposes movement, so cover and timing become as important as speed. The fox crosses open terrain carefully, widening its search even when concealment becomes limited. Small animals among rocks explain why hunters inspect crevices as carefully as exposed ground. Any chase begins with reducing distance before the target can detect the approach and escape. Tall grass can hide approach, but it can also hide the prey's exit path. Among water-worn stones, scent may collect in sheltered pockets and provide a trail to follow. Dense stems briefly erase the outline, letting movement continue without a full silhouette. A pause allows the fox to assess sound, wind, distance, and available cover before continuing. With its muzzle lowered, the fox follows traces that sight alone would often miss. Each step extends the search, although open terrain continually increases the chance of being seen. The grazing animals face a different problem, finding enough food without losing the horizon. Heads above the scrub turn the group into a shared early warning system. A lowered neck brings food within reach, but it also narrows the field of view. Spread across the slope, the animals feed while keeping space between bodies. Scrub offers partial cover, yet its gaps still leave movement readable from far away. In this landscape, even quiet grazing is shaped by visibility and escape routes. Lean bodies and long legs fit ground where plants grow low and widely separated. Spacing allows alarm to spread through the group when one animal reacts to possible danger. Shadows give brief cover, but they also make it harder to judge what is moving. From higher ground, the group gains a wider view across terrain where scent may travel unpredictably. Every bite is small, so feeding time must be stretched across open ground. Against the mountains, grazing becomes a balance between intake, exposure, and moving on. Snow above is part of the habitat system, controlling the water and plant growth available below. Mountain moisture supports life, but cold conditions also shorten the season of easier feeding. Ice and rock create barriers that decide which routes remain worth the energy. For animals below, the high country stores water, while also restricting movement between valleys. In the icy highlands, wings provide a more efficient way to cover distance than movement on foot. Rising air along the ridges creates lift that large birds can use to travel with fewer wing beats. A condor uses this lift to search broad terrain while conserving energy during long flights. Broad wings turn altitude into search range, allowing large areas to be covered with limited effort. When several birds circle, shared movement can draw others toward the same potential feeding area. Long flight feathers spread and adjust, maintaining control as mountain air shifts around the wings. Each tilt of the wing trades height for direction across the open slope. On the ground or a perch, the hooked bill reflects a feeding role centered on carcasses. Snowy ledges provide secure resting and launching points above the open slopes. Gliding extends the search across valleys that would demand far more energy from an animal on foot. Even when much of the body disappears from view, the wings still reveal the scale of control. Against bright cloud, the broad outline remains visible, moving slowly while conserving energy. The wings' dark feathers manage airflow across a broad surface, helping maintain a stable glide. Descending sacrifices stored height, which must later be regained through rising air or active flight. Below the flight path, running grazers show how quickly open slopes can become exposed. The condor searches the broader terrain for movement, stillness, or gatherings that may indicate food. Mist can obscure those signals, reducing the value of visibility across an otherwise enormous search area. When conditions clear, lower flight brings the bird closer to details on the ground. Near shrubs, a smaller raptor uses rapid wing beats where broad gliding would be less effective. The larger scavenger remains over open slopes, where visibility and rising air improve again. Climbing on rising air reduces effort by letting the mountain supply part of the lift. From altitude, successful searching depends less on speed than on patient, repeated coverage. The final glide leaves the plateau under observation, where animal remains may feed the next ecological stage. The plateau is first read from above, where condors search without spending hard-won energy. Ice and rock below explain the bargain here. Resources collect only in scattered pockets. For guanacos, feeding begins with exposure, because every mouthful is taken in open sight. Steep ridges and empty slopes leave little cover, making early warning more valuable than strength. A grazing animal remains exposed on open ground, where distance can become the first route to safety. Against distant ridges, elevation improves visibility, allowing approaching movement to be detected earlier. Close grazing lowers the head, so the herd must turn many ears into shared awareness. Scattered bodies keep lines of sight open, while still allowing each animal to reach sparse food. From farther back, their movement shows how widely the highland forces grazers to search. Every bite looks ordinary, but in thin pastures, feeding time is also exposure time. The valley gives runners room, yet the same openness removes places to disappear. Even bare stone can support scattered life, showing how little usable ground the plateau provides. The herd's loose formation spreads attention across the slope instead of crowding one safe point. Following narrow paths saves effort, but it also commits the group to predictable routes. Wet ground below becomes a reason to gather, because green patches are never evenly spread. Their thick coats and low feeding pasture match a place where wind, cold, and grazing meet. A fox searching among stones uses smaller spaces that remain inaccessible to larger animals. Shallow wetlands change the equation, concentrating food and movement where dry country gives little. Seasonal flowers indicate a brief period when food and plant cover become more widely available. Beyond the grassland, dark forest signals a new habitat with different rules of cover. From above, lakes and bogs form natural corridors that influence where animals can travel. Any shelter in these exposed uplands must contend with wind, cold, and limited natural cover. Snowmelt links the mountain to lower valleys, carrying water toward habitats far below. The Puma enters where open slopes and broken cover finally meet in useful balance. The hunt begins before the chase, with a low body reducing the chance of early detection. Rest and readiness overlap for this cat, because every chase must earn its course. Forward-facing eyes support depth judgment, helping the predator assess whether the remaining gap is manageable. Muscle is only the final tool. The first advantage is getting near unseen. Each measured step limits noise and preserves energy until the predator reaches a useful position. A profile against dry grass shows how the cat uses edges rather than open pursuit. What matters now is selection, because one alert guanaco can undo the approach. Grass and shadow break the outline, giving the puma a few more hidden meters. Once contact begins, the prey's speed tests whether the predator's careful approach closed enough distance. Feeding follows quickly, turning a brief burst of force into days of energy. Across the wider shore, one kill can attract competitors and scavengers from the surrounding habitats. Exposed remains can extend one successful hunt into feeding opportunities for scavengers nearby. Cloud forest replaces open sightlines with layered cover, changing how animals detect and approach one another. Here, rivers carve travel lanes to a habitat where straight paths rarely exist. The canopy stacks life vertically, so movement happens above, below, and between trunks. From overhead, the green roof looks continuous, but beneath it every gap matters. Mist reduces visual range, increasing the value of sound, scent, and close movement cues. A river through dense trees becomes both passage and meeting point for many animals. Where settlement meets forest, continuous wildlife routes can become narrower and more fragmented. The jaguar appears where rock, leaves, and shadow make concealment part of power. Its rosettes do more than decorate. They break the body into forest fragments. Lying still, the cat turns patience into cover before any attack is possible. A close ambush hunter cannot waste energy chasing through tangled ground for long. A heavy skull and powerful forequarters support the short, forceful contact required by ambush hunting. In cluttered shade, whiskers and ears help read spaces the eyes cannot fully solve. A display of teeth may warn nearby animals, while preserving distance without immediate physical contact. A solitary hunter benefits from access to productive routes, reliable cover, and places where prey regularly passes. Thick shoulders suggest strength for close work, not a body designed for endless pursuit. Roots and fallen would slow many animals, yet they give the jaguar hiding edges. In broken light, stillness becomes camouflage as much as the spotted coat does. The same heavy build that brings power also makes unnecessary movement expensive. Rest beside timber is strategy, storing energy for the moment that actually matters. When the head rises, stored energy gives way to renewed attention toward the surrounding cover. Close to the ground, scent can reveal what the leaves keep hidden. At the bank, the jaguar enters a corridor where drinking animals and cover overlap. The river widens its hunting map, adding routes that many forest predators avoid. With only the head exposed, the cat keeps its body concealed beneath reflection. For this jaguar, water is not a boundary, it is another line of approach. Swimming turns separated banks into connected territory, expanding where the animal can search. Even on the surface, broken light helps hide the full shape of the body. The muddy edge is useful because scent, tracks, and access gather in one place. Leaving the river, the cat returns to vegetation, where stealth becomes stronger again. The tapir changes the rhythm, replacing ambush pressure with the slow work of browsing. Its bulk is protection, but in dense cover, size also makes movement easier to notice. The flexible snout works like a searching hand, testing leaves, fruit, and ground. Low feeding keeps the animal near cover, where a retreat route remains close. Drinking concentrates vulnerability, because the head drops exactly where predators may wait. The edge offers relief and exposure together, forcing caution into every pause. A heavy body may discourage some attackers, but early detection remains the tapir's first protection. The broad head is suited to pushing through growth and sorting food by touch. Young tapirs can follow adults along established pathways through dense vegetation and difficult ground. Step by step, browsing converts scattered plants into movement across the understory. Seeds carried away after feeding can connect an animal's movement with new plant growth elsewhere. A smaller spotted cat changes the scale, trading bulk for precision in the understory. Its patterned body works among leaves, where hiding begins before any chase. With prey in the branches, vertical space becomes a practical feeding advantage. The branch is narrow territory, where balance matters as much as teeth. Paws and claws secure the position, letting the cat handle food without falling. Small adjustments maintain balance, showing why movement in the canopy depends on precise control. Keeping the catch off the ground separates feeding from the crowded forest floor. Short bites and quick movements reveal how little margin the canopy gives. The patterned coat disappears into sun patches, reducing the chance of being tracked. A dangling catch shows the reward of climbing, but also the awkward course. Back on firmer footing, the cat stays close to cover instead of open paths. Large eyes can improve vision in the limited light reaching the lower forest. Here, hunting is measured in pauses, tiny sounds, and sudden changes of angle. Moving around trunks, the cat uses clutter as a shield rather than an obstacle. Above the concealed forest floor, a harpy eagle uses height to reach hunting routes among the branches. From a high perch, the eagle can monitor pathways that remain inaccessible to hunters on the ground. The launch point matters, because attacks here must pass through branches and gaps. Open sky gives space briefly, but the real hunting problem waits inside the canopy. At a feeding site, captured prey becomes the energy that supports future movement and hunting. Massive talons and a hooked-bill suit a raptor that restrains prey through gripping force. Even folded wings suggest strength needed to control short flights between trees. A lowered head keeps attention centered on food, while the bird remains responsive to nearby movement. Broad wings and a compact strike make sense where long pursuit would fail. Stillness saves energy for a bird whose attacks must be sudden and accurate. Perching above the floor also keeps the hunter clear of ground-level disturbance. High nesting sites provide separation from the forest floor, though weather and exposure still remain. A bare perch becomes a lookout where every opening below can matter. Raising young requires repeated food deliveries, nest defense, and long periods of attendance. The nest shows the hidden cost behind each adult's force and patience. Dense vegetation can hide large animals within moments, making encounters in this habitat unusually brief. Mist shortens visible distance, turning recognizable forms into uncertain movement between trees. Snow, cloud, and forest link high water sources with the greener corridors developing below. Rolling canopy hides the ground, so the real map is mostly invisible from above. Light enters in fragments, deciding where shade, food, and cover overlap. This layered habitat favors specialized movement, feeding, and concealment over speed alone. At smaller scale, the spotted cat relies on the same layered concealment that defines the forest. In deep shade, markings turn the face into broken bark and leaves. Looking upward, the cat turns branches into roots, shelter, and possible escape. Stillness beside stone, timber, allows the animal's outline to merge with irregular surfaces. Wet fur and a dark background can further reduce contrast around the animal's outline. Only fragments of movement remain visible, demonstrating how camouflage disrupts recognition of the whole body. Whiskers, forward vision, and the low posture gather information before the animal changes position. The final close view emphasizes a forest shaped by patience, concealment, and roots hidden beneath vegetation. Inside the hollow, the spotted cat gains concealment from darkness, broken surfaces, and limited sightlines. A watchful eye reveals the first advantage here, because detection often matters before any movement begins. Against pale stone, the markings divide the face into shapes that blend with shadow and texture. Climbing adds another layer of protection, turning trunks and branches into roots unavailable to many ground hunters. Looking upward, the cat appears to assess the canopy for cover, movement, and possible escape. Vertical space offers more than shelter, because height creates distance from threats moving below. Careful paw placement helps preserve silence, while testing each surface before the body commits its weight. Dense leaves break the outline into fragments, making movement harder to follow through the canopy. That interrupted visibility favors concealment, especially where branches divide every clear line of sight. Human presence briefly enters the sequence, suggesting that wildlife here may share habitat with nearby activity. On the forest floor, another hunter relies less on height and more on stillness. The snake represents a different strategy, using a low profile and concealment to remain difficult to detect. Close contact with the ground allows texture and shadow to become part of its protection. The sequence then shifts to a bird, whose bright color remains effective inside layered forest cover. Within the dim canopy, vivid plumage is partly controlled by branches, shade, and broken light. A secure perch can provide visibility, while preserving a quick route back into surrounding cover. Red plumage draws attention, yet the forest continues to interrupt clear views of the bird. By holding among vines and branches, the bird combines display space with immediate shelter. What appears decorative also involves a trade-off between visibility, exposure, and the ability to retreat. Height and balance make that trade-off possible, keeping the bird connected to nearby cover. As this forest arc closes, concealment and visibility emerge as to different responses to pressure. The setting then opens onto grassland, where distance, numbers, and timing replace dense cover. Hyenas gather where food may be contested, making social position as important as hunger. Near feeding lions, restraint can be safer than confrontation when stronger animals already control access. Across open ground, hyenas depend on scent, posture, and movement to judge changing opportunities. At a carcass, feeding depends not only on hunger, but also on timing and rank. Nearby zebras represent the other side of this pressure, where many eyes reduce the chance of surprise. Elephants and dust widen the scene, placing hyenas within a crowded landscape of movement and food. Pausing can conserve energy, because not every possible feeding chance justifies pursuit. Young hyenas shift the focus toward how future scavengers learn within a competitive social group. An adult holding position at the edge may be watching for food, rivals, or movement. Vultures add another layer of competition, turning the remaining carcass into a race for access. The clan's advantage lies in persistence and coordination, not simply in discovering food first. Together, hyenas can maintain pressure through numbers, movement, and repeated attempts to gain position. In open desert terrain, small mammals often survive by sharing the work of vigilance. Standing upright raises a short body above grass and sand, extending the range of vision. A sentry system matters because feeding animals cannot monitor every direction at once. Stillness and alert ears can provide warning before the group spends energy on escape. Ground birds share the same exposed space, where cover, shade, and retreat routes shape each pause. Meerkats remain close because shared awareness can compensate for the limits of individual size. Small bodies near a burrow show why shelter must remain within quick reach. Every step away from cover increases both feeding opportunity and the distance back to safety. At the water's edge, exposure rises as drinkers, hunters, and watchers converge in one place. Lionesses enter that pressure zone, where patience and positioning matter before speed. From above, the plains show why both hunters and grazers depend on routes and spacing. Oryx meet open terrain with long horns, alert spacing, and the ability to move quickly. The horns provide a formidable defense, but their value still depends on angle, footing, and timing. Within the herd, every body adds warning, while every gap can create a vulnerable opening. Dust and heat make movement costly, encouraging animals to conserve speed until it is needed. Wide spacing allows grazing while leaving enough room for a sudden turn or retreat. A lone oryx beyond the group may face greater exposure without the herd's shared warning system. The central calculation is when to run, because wasted effort reduces energy for the next response. When the animals shift together, the herd becomes a moving barrier of horns and attention. Greater separation may ease competition for grass, but it also weakens collective vigilance. As the herd realigns, defense becomes a group formation rather than an individual feature. With fading light, visibility changes, and patient hunters may gain a stronger advantage. The next pressure comes from migration, where movement can protect the herd while draining each animal. Wildebeests spread across the plain, turning individual vulnerability into a broad mass of movement. At a river, that broad journey narrows, forcing any animals toward the same difficult passage. The herd gathers in waves, because delay carries costs, yet crossing may bring greater danger. Bodies crowd near the bank, where momentum, current, and limited space press together. Once the crossing begins, the river removes much of the freedom available on open grassland. In water, strength is tested differently as current, depth, and crowding shape every step. A close view of horn and wet coat emphasizes how physical power still meets fatigue. Calves face the greatest challenge because smaller bodies must keep pace with the moving herd. Across open grass, numbers support movement, but they cannot protect every individual equally. Crowding and dust show how quickly forward movement can become pressure from behind. For a young animal, staying close to an adult may provide the safest path through the group. Zebras crossing the same landscape rely on speed, spacing, and disruptive patterning in motion. When herds meet water again, the crossing becomes both a barrier and a route forward. A sudden splash at the bank can expose the body and disrupt the animal's footing. Mixed herds gathering nearby suggest how different species depend on the same limited resources. Zebras feed beneath trees, where shade and spacing can help preserve open escape routes. Moving in smaller groups may keep the herd flexible rather than tightly compressed. At the water's edge, lowered heads create brief openings that nearby animals must help cover. Stripes do not make a zebra invisible, but motion can make one outline harder to isolate. When the herd bursts through water, speed replaces stillness as the most immediate defense. The sequence returns to lions, where hunting success often depends on waiting before movement. Resting in shade can be part of energy conservation, especially before any demanding chase. A pride spread beneath cover can remain connected while reducing heat and unnecessary effort. In scrub and grass, shadows help predators approach without forcing an early chase. The same stillness allows a lion to study passing animals while preserving energy. Dust around the body may further obscure direction and reduce the clarity of movement. At the waterline, crocodiles add another layer of danger to every approach. A mostly submerged body gives little warning, making the surface difficult to interpret. Eyes and teeth may appear before the full body, reducing the time available to react. On the bank, armored bodies remain close to the channel where sudden movement is possible. A crocodile facing approaching drinkers changes the meaning of every step toward the edge. Hippos and birds share the water, though each uses the channel for very different needs. When lions feed on buffalo, the carcass becomes a signal carried through scent and visibility. The hunters control access first, while nearby scavengers assess when an opening may appear. Hyenas arrive because a completed hunt can quickly become a second contest over possession. Below the surface, crocodiles show that feeding pressure continues beyond the grassland. Even a small wake can reveal movement, while most of the hunter remains concealed. Vultures and hyenas gather together, each relying on different strengths to reach the remains. Once birds settle near a carcass, other scavengers may be drawn toward the same location. From elevated perches, vultures combine patience and wide vision before descending to feed. A crowded feeding site shows how quickly remains can pass through many competing animals. Each scavenger must find access, while size, timing, and position influence the feeding order. As the scavenging sequence ends, the story returns from carcasses to forest corridors. Back in the forest, shelter and stable resting sites may matter more than open ground speed. Tall trunks and filtered light create staging areas for animals moving through the canopy. Butterflies cluster densely, turning many fragile individuals into a single visible mass. Grouping together may help reduce exposure, while the insects remain inactive between movements. Each wing is delicate alone, yet the cluster changes how space and protection are shared. When the group takes flight, stored energy is converted into a sudden wave of movement. Long-distance movement depends on resting places, because migration is built from pauses as well as flight. On leaves, butterflies can remain within canopy cover while gaining warmth from available light. A hanging cluster illustrates how shade and shelter may protect wings from sudden weather changes. Feeding on flowers links the journey to plants that provide energy for continued movement. Back on the trunks, stillness becomes part of the route rather than a break from it. The column of wings uses the tree as shelter, resting surface, and gathering point. Scattered butterflies in dense vegetation show that mass movement is still made of individuals. The forest floor helps maintain the moisture and cover that support passage through the habitat. Aerial waterways reveal corridors that may connect feeding areas, shelter, and resting sites. Waterfalls and canopies suggest that movement depends on an entire habitat, not a single tree. A butterfly feeding on a flower closes this arc with energy intake and renewed movement. The scene then shifts to red crabs, where migration now unfolds across wet ground. One crab reveals a body suited to moving between forest floor, stream margins, and shore. Together, thousands transform the ground into a moving route toward the water. On the forest floor, red crabs turn exposure into movement by crossing in dense numbers. The ants reveal a parallel strategy, where tiny bodies become effective only through constant coordination. A mound concentrates shelter, traffic, and food handling into architecture, built by countless short trips. For the crabs, armor helps against rough ground, but every open patch slows the crossing. Close to the ground, legs and antennae become sensors, reading obstacles the wider view misses. Across bare sand, cooperation keeps the colony supplied where a single worker would disappear quickly. The story then expands underwater, where great size serves feeding rather than pursuit. Beside the whale shark, smaller fish use its shadow and bulk as moving cover. Its broad body can look imposing, yet the key strategy is slow filtration through rich surface water. Near the surface, steady swimming matters more than speed, because food is scattered in the blue. The spotted skim breaks up the outline, a soft camouflage in shifting blue light. By filtering tiny life, the whale shark links organisms to small to see with larger animals. On the grassland, a wildebeest turns horns and waiting to leverage against a grounded lion. With light dropping, the wider herd keeps moving, because open plains reward constant spacing. The closing landscape pulls these struggles together,